Hey guys, tonight we are drifting back, way back, to a land of sun-baked earth and a life-giving river to explore how ancient Nubian mirrors reflected more than just faces. Imagine yourself, if you will, standing on the banks of the mighty Nile, but not the Nile of modern cruise ships and bustling cities. No, you're in ancient Nubia, where the air is thick with the scent of dry earth and distant cooking fires. And the sun. Oh, that sun beats down with an intensity that makes the very sand beneath your feet shimmer like molten gold. The only sound, perhaps, is the gentle lapping of the river against the reeds or the distant cry of an ibis. Frankly, without your 21st century air conditioning, readily available bug spray, and that fancy water bottle that keeps things cold for 12 hours, you probably wouldn't last a week in this environment, let alone manage to look fabulous without your 20-step skincare routine. It was a different world, a tougher world, but one filled with a unique, enduring beauty and remarkable ingenuity. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It really does help the channel out, more than you know. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where you're tuning in from tonight. Go ahead and post your city or country and the local time in the comments below. It's always fascinating to see our little community of history sleep enthusiasts spread across the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a vast expanse, a realm cradled by the longest river in the world. This is Nubia, a name that echoes with whispers of gold, powerful kingdoms, and a civilization that both rivaled and intertwined with its more famous northern neighbor. Ancient Egypt. Your feet sink slightly into the warm, fine sand, a pale tan against the deeper, richer ochre of the distant hills. The air you breathe is dry, very dry, carrying the faint, dusty aroma of the immense desert that stretches out from the fertile ribbon, clinging desperately to the Nile's banks. Look around you. The sky above is a brilliant, almost impossible, azure, rarely troubled by clouds, an endless canvas for the sun's daily. Fiery passage. That sun is a dominant force here, a relentless presence dictating the rhythms of life. It rises early, painting the eastern cliffs in hues of rose and apricot, and by mid-morning, its heat is a palpable weight, a shimmering curtain that hangs over the landscape, urging all sensible creatures, including yourself, to seek whatever shade can be found. You might find yourself huddled beneath the sparse, feathery canopy of an acacia tree, its thorns a stark reminder of the land's harshness, its delicate leaves a testament to life's tenacity. Or perhaps you've sought refuge in the cool, dim interior of a mud brick dwelling, the thick walls surprisingly effective at keeping the worst of the furnace-like heat at bay. Fashion was important, naturally, even if your main concern was how not to melt into a puddle before lunchtime. A little style, a little self-care, went a long way in making life more than just survival. The Nile, a majestic, life-sustaining artery, snakes its way through this arid world. It's not just a river, it was the original life support system, complete with its own moody soundtrack of gurgles, splashes, and the occasional, deeply resonant grunt of a disgruntled hippo, its annual inundation. The flooding that brought rich, black silt to the valley was the very pulse of existence, the promise of sustenance when the waters receded. They left behind a narrow strip of intensely fertile land, a vibrant green against the stark yellows and browns of the desert. This was where life truly flourished, where crops of barley, wheat, and millet were coaxed from the earth, where date palms offered sweet fruit and welcome shade, and where communities clustered together, their lives interwoven with the river's ebb and flow. You'd see people, their skin gleaming, often adorned with simple jewelry, perhaps of faience beads or polished stone. They move with a grace and an economy of motion born from living in this demanding, yet generous environment, their language. A precursor to Old Nubian would sound musical, rhythmic, utterly alien to your modern ears, yet conveying all the universal human experiences, joy, sorrow, love, and the daily concerns of family and livelihood. The kingdoms that arose here, most famously the kingdom of Kush with its capitals at Kerma, Napata, and later Meroe, were sophisticated and powerful entities. These weren't just scattered tribes, they were organized states with complex social structures, distinct religious beliefs, and a vibrant artistic tradition. Indeed, for certain periods, Nubian pharaohs even ruled over Egypt itself as the 25th dynasty, a fact that sometimes gets a little glossed over in more Egypt-centric historical accounts. Imagine the sounds beyond the river, the bleating of goats, the lowing of cattle, and for animal husbandry was crucial, the distant tapping of a craftsman's hammer, perhaps working on pottery, or, as we'll soon discover, something a little more reflective. Children's laughter, too, would surely echo, a timeless sound as they played games in the dust, their futures yet unwritten but deeply rooted in this ancient, enduring land. Historians still argue whether the earliest Nubian cultural identity was wholly distinct or deeply intertwined with pre-dynastic Egyptian influences from the get-go. A chicken and egg debate played out over millennia with shifting borders and shared deities. But what is undeniable is the unique resilience and character of Nubian civilization, flourishing for thousands of years in a landscape that demanded both strength and ingenuity. You might even catch a whiff of something cooking, a hearty stew, perhaps, or bread baking in a clay oven. The aroma of burning charcoal from a blacksmith's forge could drift on the breeze, a reminder of the skilled artisans who transformed raw materials into tools, weapons, and objects of beauty. One quirky little tidbit is how attuned they were to the river's subtle cues. The behavior of certain fish or the nesting patterns of birds along the Nile could indicate changes in water levels or the approaching season. A kind of ancient farmer's almanac read from nature itself. This was a land of contrast, the searing heat of midday and the surprising coolness of the desert night, the life-giving fertility of the Nile Valley and the barren, unforgiving expanse of the surrounding deserts, the monumental ambition of its rulers and the simple, daily rhythms of its people. And it is from this very world, this crucible of sun, sand, and river, that the first desire for a clearer, more personal reflection would begin to shimmer into existence, leading to the creation of objects that did, indeed, reflect far more than just a face. Section 2. So, you're there, in this land of potent sun and the ever-present, life-giving Nile, a place where survival and a sense of self are being constantly negotiated. Before any artisan even dreamed of fashioning a disc of polished metal, before the first true mirror was crafted with deliberate intent, the world itself offered fleeting, tantalizing glimpses of a reflected reality. Imagine, for a moment, your ancient Nubian self, perhaps venturing down to the river's edge at dawn. The air is cool, the sun just beginning its ascent, and the Great Nile, in a quiet cove sheltered from the main current, lies still and dark like a polished obsidian slab. You kneel, cupping your hands to drink, and there, looking back at you from the water's surface, is a face. Your face. It's a slightly wavering image. Perhaps, disturbed by the gentle sway of a nearby papyrus reed, or the almost imperceptible tremor of your own movement. The colors might be muted, the details a little soft, but it's undeniably you. This was nature's first mirror, a spontaneous gift from the landscape. Your first encounter with your own face might have been a rather wobbly, distorted affair in a hippo-warmed patch of still water, not exactly Instagram ready. Let's be honest. But a profound start nonetheless. This primal act of seeing oneself, even imperfectly, must have been a moment of quiet revelation. a spark of self-awareness that distinguished humans from most other creatures. What did you think? Seeing those eyes stare back, mimicking your every blink, was there a flicker of recognition, a sense of identity forming, or perhaps just a simple curiosity beyond the grand expanse of the Nile? Other natural mirrors would have occasionally presented themselves. A sudden downpour, a rare and precious event in this largely arid land, might leave behind temporary puddles and depressions in the rock, their surfaces mirroring the vast sky and, for a brief time, your own curious face. Imagine the delight, or perhaps the consternation, of a child stumbling upon their own reflection in such an unexpected place. A fleeting playmate who vanished as the sun reclaimed the moisture. Then there were stones, while true obsidian mirrors, meticulously polished volcanic glass, were more characteristic of other ancient cultures far afield. It's not impossible that a particularly smooth, dark, water-worn pebble, or a freshly fractured piece of quartz or galena with a natural sheen, might have caught the light just so, offering a tiny, distorted glimpse of an eye, a nose, a lock of hair. These wouldn't have been practical for detailed grooming, of course. Trying to apply intricate kohl eyeliner using the reflection in a wind-rippled patch of the Nile. That's an extreme sport for your eyelashes. Right there, probably resulting in more of a surprised raccoon look than regal Nubian. The mainstream historical understanding is that early humans across many cultures, long before the Bronze Age brought us metal mirrors, utilized still pools of water, or water collected in simple bowls, as their primary means of seeing their reflection. It's a universal starting point. This liquid gaze, these watery surfaces, were humanity's first shared dressing table, its first collective selfie spot, albeit one that required a certain stillness and good lighting. Archaeologists sometimes wonder if the earliest personal adornments, the careful plaiting of hair, the application of simple pigments from ochre or clay, the stringing of shells or seeds, were developed with the aid of these fleeting natural reflections, or if they were created more by tactile sense, by feel, and by the affirming or corrective feedback of the community. Perhaps it was a bit of both, a synergy between solitary discovery and shared aesthetics. It's also important to remember the quality of these reflections. Water can be murky, easily disturbed. A breath of wind, a pebble dropped. Even the shadow of a passing bird could shatter the image, returning you to a world where your own face was largely a mystery, something known more by touch or by the reactions of others than by direct, clear observation. This very ephemerality, this tantalizing imperfection, might well have been the catalyst, the deep-seated human desire that spurred the quest for a more permanent, more portable, and clearer way to see oneself. There's a certain magic, a certain mystique, associated with reflections in water that echoes through ancient mythologies worldwide. Water was often seen as a portal, a liminal space between worlds. Who knows what thoughts or beliefs might have stirred in the Nubian mind as they gazed into those depths? Did they see just themselves, or did they sometimes imagine other eyes looking back? Spirits of the river, ancestors, or even deities, of course. If a particularly large crocodile decided to surface mid-gaze, your reflection suddenly became the absolute least of your worries. Talk about a photobomb that ends all further contemplation. One rather quirky tidbit to consider is how animals might have played a role. Imagine watching a gazelle drink from a waterhole, its own image perfectly mirrored below. Such sights might have further sparked the understanding of reflection as a natural phenomenon. Not necessarily supernatural, but certainly intriguing. Or perhaps observing a cat preening itself, seemingly oblivious to its reflection in a puddle, might have highlighted the unique human capacity for self-recognition and the curiosity it engenders, the desire to see oneself, to understand one's own appearance. Seems to be a deeply human trait. It's tied to identity, to social interaction, to a fundamental sense of being, and in ancient Nubia, a land of striking beauty, both in its people and its environment. A land where personal adornment and presentation would come to hold significant cultural value. These first, fleeting encounters with nature's gaze were the humble, yet crucial, precursors to the development of more sophisticated tools of self-perception. The shimmering surface of the Nile, the temporary gleam of a rain puddle, the faint sheen on a polished stone. These were the canvases upon which the first human images were cast. They were imperfect, transient, often frustratingly obscure, but they were enough. Enough to plant a seed. Enough to awaken a desire for clarity, for permanence, for a reflection that could be held, controlled, and cherished. It was from these natural, ephemeral gazes that the journey towards the crafted mirror, and all that it represented, truly began. The stage was set for human ingenuity to take over where nature's casual offerings left off. Section 3. So, you're standing there, by the edge of that life-giving, yet often frustratingly reflective, Nile humanity in its infinite and sometimes impatient wisdom. Collectively decided that squinting into a puddle while a grumpy hippo potentially eyed your ankles wasn't quite the peak of personal grooming or profound self-discovery. Progress was inevitable. That nagging desire for a clearer, more controllable reflection. A gaze you could summon at will without waiting for the wind to die down or the local wildlife to take a coffee break. Began to stir the embers of ingenuity, the human mind, that marvelous problem-solving engine. Started to ponder how can we capture that fleeting image, make it brighter, make it ours. The answer, as it so often is in the grand sweep of technological advancement, lay not in water or readily available stone, but beneath the earth, in the very bones of the planet, metal. The age of metallurgy was dawning, or perhaps already well underway in neighboring lands, and whispers of its transformative power would have eventually reached the skilled artisans of Nubia. Imagine the scene shifting from the riverbank to a bustling workshop, perhaps nestled within a growing settlement like Kerma, known for its incredible craftsmanship. The air here is different. It's thick with the acrid tang of smoke from a charcoal-fueled furnace, the rhythmic clang of hammer on metal, the hiss of hot metal plunged into water, and the focused, intense energy of creation. Your eyes adjust to the dimmer light, pierced by the fiery glow of the forge. Here, artisans, individuals of great skill and patience, are beginning to experiment. Copper was a known quantity. Nubia itself was rich in mineral resources, including copper ore. You might see them taking these greenish, earthy rocks, crushing them, and then, through the magic of intense heat, coaxing forth the gleaming, reddish-brown metal within. This native copper, once smelted and purified, could be hammered into sheets. Hammered and hammered, thinned and smoothed, and then, with immense effort, polished. A highly polished copper surface can indeed offer a reflection, albeit a rather warm, reddish-tinted one, prone to tarnishing quickly. It was a step up from a murky puddle, certainly, offering a more stable, if somewhat ruddy, version of yourself. You could finally see if that new ochre cheek paint was evenly applied. Mostly. But the real breakthrough for ancient mirrors, the mainstream technological leap that graced dressing tables, or perhaps just convenient flat rocks. Across much of the ancient world, including areas that traded with and influenced Nubia, was the discovery of bronze. Bronze is an alloy, typically copper mixed with a small but crucial percentage of tin. Sometimes, if tin was scarce, arsenic was used to achieve a similar effect, creating what is known as arsenical bronze. This addition of tin or arsenic did something wonderful. It made the metal harder, more durable, and capable of achieving a much brighter, more silvery, and more stable polish than copper alone. Debate continues among metallurgists and archaeologists regarding the exact composition and sourcing of the tin or arsenic used in early Nubian bronzes, which would have significantly affected mirror quality and the complex trade routes involved in acquiring these essential additives. Tin, especially, wasn't locally abundant in many mirror-making regions, making it a valuable commodity. So, picture your Nubian artisan, now a bronze smith. They would create a mold, perhaps from clay or stone, carefully shaped into a disc. The most common form for these early mirrors? The molten bronze. A shimmering, incandescent liquid gold would be poured into the mold, a moment of intense heat and controlled danger. Once cooled, the rough bronze casting would be freed, a dull, unpromising object at this stage. And now, the real work, the truly laborious part, began the polishing. Forget your modern power tools and microfiber cloths. This was achieved through sheer human effort, using a succession of abrasives, coarser sand, perhaps, to grind down the initial roughness, followed by finer and finer grades of abrasive powders, crushed quartz, sandstone dust, maybe even powdered pumice if it could be traded for. Each stage required hours, days, possibly even weeks of patient, repetitive rubbing and buffing. Polishing bronze to a mirror shine with ancient abrasives was probably the original extreme arm workout. Forget the gym, just volunteer to make a mirror for the local dignitary, and you'd have biceps of steel, or rather, bronze. The artisan would use a piece of leather or a dense cloth, applying the abrasive powder and working the surface in circular or back and forth motions, gradually smoothing out every imperfection, every tiny pit and scratch, until, slowly, miraculously, a faint sheen began to emerge. As they worked, the dull, earthy bronze would begin to transform, hinting at the reflective magic locked within. The goal was a surface so smooth, so flawless at a microscopic level, that light would bounce off it uniformly, creating a clear image. One rather interesting, though perhaps speculative, tidbit is the possibility that some of the very earliest, pre-bronze metal reflections might have come from rare finds of native copper nuggets hammered flat, or even more exotically, pieces of meteoritic iron. Iron from meteorites was available before humanity mastered smelting iron from terrestrial ores, and was often prized for its celestial origin and unique properties. A polished piece of this heaven-sent iron could indeed offer a reflection, however imperfect. The final stages of polishing these bronze mirrors would have used the finest abrasives imaginable, perhaps even just the artisan's own skilled hands and a specific type of well-worn leather, to bring up that ultimate gleam. The quality of the reflection was directly proportional to the skill and patience of the polisher. A status symbol in the making, no doubt. And imagine the moment of completion holding up that newly finished bronze disc, now no longer dull but a radiant, shimmering surface, catching the light, and for the first time, offering a bright, relatively clear, and portable image of the artisan's own tired but triumphant face. It wasn't glass. It wasn't silver-backed like modern mirrors. So the reflection would still have had a slightly yellowish or coppery tint, and it would require regular repolishing to prevent tarnishing from the humidity of the Nile Valley. But it was a world away from a fleeting glimpse in a puddle. This was a crafted object, a piece of technology, a testament to human ingenuity and the enduring desire to see oneself. And if you, heaven forbid, dropped your brand new, painstakingly polished bronze mirror, oh, the agony. That's not a crack you can just Photoshop out with a filter. And the dent would require a whole new round of hammering and that arm-busting polishing. These were precious, valuable items, forged with sweat and skill from the very earth itself. So, there you have it, a gleaming, if slightly temperamental, disc of bronze, wrested from the earth and painstakingly polished into a semblance of reflective perfection. But a mirror isn't just its shiny face. Is it holding a recently forged piece of metal? still warm perhaps, or quickly tarnishing in the humid air. Directly in your hand to check if that new kohl eyeliner is on point, or if your carefully plaited hair is still, well, plaited. Wasn't exactly the peak of ergonomic design or user comfort. Hence, the almost immediate and very sensible invention of the ouch prevention stick, more elegantly known as a handle, and beyond mere utility. These handles, along with the non-reflective backs of the mirror discs themselves, became canvases for artistic expression, for symbolic meaning, and perhaps even for a little bit of ancient bling. You're now holding one of these complete ancient Nubian mirrors in your mind's hand. The disc itself is most commonly round, a perfect circle like the sun or the full moon, those other great reflectors in the sky, or perhaps it's slightly pear-shaped, a common variant that might have felt comfortable in the palm or offered a subtly different field of view. The edges are smooth, carefully finished to avoid any sharpness. The reflective side, as we know, is that polished bronze, demanding your constant attention with a soft cloth and perhaps a bit of fine abrasive powder to keep its gleam alive. But turn it over. The back of the disc, the side not meant for gazing at your lovely self, was often where the real party happened. Artistically speaking, here you might find intricate designs incised into the metal with a sharp tool. These could be geometric patterns, swirling spirals, repeating chevrons, intricate lattices that perhaps echoed the designs found on Nubian pottery or textiles. Or they might be stylized representations of plants from the Nile Valley, the graceful lotus flower, a symbol of creation and rebirth. Or the sturdy papyrus reed, representing growth and the bounty of the river. Sometimes, though less common on the disc itself and more on the handles. Animal motifs might appear, a sleek gazelle, a powerful lion, or perhaps even a protective cobra. The uraeus, a symbol borrowed from or shared with their Egyptian neighbors to the north. Now, let's consider the handle. This crucial component wasn't always made of the same bronze as the disc, while some mirrors might have had a simple tang of bronze extending from the disc, perhaps wrapped in leather or cloth for a better grip. Many of the more elaborate examples featured separately crafted handles. This is a well-established fact. Ancient mirrors across various cultures, certainly including Egyptian ones which had close ties and periods of direct rule over Nubia and vice versa. Remember those Nubian pharaohs of the 25th dynasty often featured handles made from a delightful variety of materials. You might find a handle carved from dense, dark local wood, like ebony, polished to a deep, satisfying sheen that felt cool and smooth in your hand. Or perhaps it's made from acacia wood, lighter in color but equally sturdy. Ivory, a precious commodity traded from further south in Africa, was another favored material, its creamy white surface lending itself to exquisite carving and a luxurious feel. Bone, carefully shaped and smoothed, offered a more readily available yet still elegant alternative, and sometimes the handle itself was cast in bronze, perhaps with openwork designs to make it lighter and more decorative. These handles weren't just plain sticks. Oh no, they were often sculpted with considerable artistry, a very common form, particularly in the New Kingdom period in Egypt and influential in Nubia. Was the handle shaped like a papyrus column or a bundle of papyrus stalks, topped with an umbel of flowers where it joined the disc? Some handles were anthropomorphic, meaning they were shaped like a human figure, often a slender young woman, perhaps a symbolic representation of youth and beauty. Her arms raised to support the mirror disc as if presenting your own reflection to you. Imagine the skill involved in carving such a delicate figure from wood or ivory. Art historians and archaeologists actively discuss whether certain recurring geometric or animal motifs found on Nubian mirror handles and disc backs were purely ornamental, reflecting popular styles and an artisan's flair, or if they carried deeper, specific apotropaic, that's a fancy word for warding off evil or distinct religious meanings tied to local deities or specific personal beliefs. Was that tiny carving of a frog on your handle just a cute amphibian? Or was it linked to Hecate, the frog goddess of fertility and childbirth? Tough to say for sure without a handy ancient Nubian mirror user's manual. One quirky little tidbit is the idea that some mirror handles might have been deeply personalized or even held talismanic properties for their owner. Perhaps a particular symbol carved into your handle was unique to your family, or it represented a personal achievement, or it was simply believed to bring good fortune or enhance your beauty when you gazed into the reflection it held. Some handles might have even incorporated small, polished gemstones or pieces of faience, adding a splash of color and a touch of luxury. You can imagine someone commissioning a mirror and saying, yes, the usual bronze disc, but for the handle. I'm feeling something a bit more crocodile themed today. For inner strength, you know. The way the disc attached to the handle also varied. Sometimes a tang from the disc was inserted into a slot in the handle and secured with a rivet or adhesive. Other times, the handle itself might have a slot or U-shaped cradle into which the disc was set. The craftsmanship had to be precise to ensure a secure fit. Because imagine the horror if your beautifully carved, imported ivory handle suddenly snapped off your mirror disc mid-admiry. It's like dropping your brand new smartphone and only the screen protector cracks. A small mercy. Perhaps. But still, the indignity of it all, the overall aesthetic of these mirrors, even with regional variations between. Say, a mirror from Kerma and one from Meroia centuries later often speaks of a sophisticated sense of design. There's a balance to them, a harmony between the functional reflective surface and the often ornate support. Some of those incised designs on the back of the mirror were so intricate and beautifully executed, you might find yourself spending almost as much time admiring the non-reflective side as you did your own glorious reflection. Forget my face for a moment, you might think. Just look at this lovely depiction of a gazelle prancing through the papyrus reeds. Exquisite. These weren't just utilitarian objects. They were pieces of art, statements of identity, and, quite possibly, conduits of deeper meaning. The feel of it in your hand, the cool weight of the bronze, the smoothness of a polished wooden or ivory grip, the way the light caught the incised patterns on its reverse, all contributed to the experience of owning and using one of these precious reflective tools in ancient Nubia. They were forging more than just shiny surfaces. They were forging objects that connected the user to a world of beauty, belief, and self-perception. So, you're there in ancient Nubia, perhaps holding this beautifully crafted bronze mirror, its handle cool and familiar in your grasp, its surface gleaming with your own likeness. It's a practical tool, certainly, a way to ensure your appearance is as you intend, that your elaborate hairstyle or carefully applied kohl is just so. But as you gaze into that polished disc, into those eyes looking back at you from its metallic depths, you might begin to sense that this object is reflecting something far more profound than mere physical features. It's not just for checking if you have a stray bit of fig in your teeth after breakfast, though. To be fair, that was probably still a genuine concern, even for the most regal individuals. The ancient mind, particularly in cultures like those of Nubia and its influential neighbor Egypt, rarely saw the world in purely mundane terms. Everyday objects were often imbued with layers of symbolism, with magical potential, with connections to the spiritual realms that were considered just as real, if not more so, than the physical world you navigated daily. The very act of seeing your image perfectly duplicated, seemingly captured within this inanimate object, must have been a source of constant wonder and perhaps a little trepidation. Where did that image reside? Was it merely light playing on a surface? Or was it something more? Was a part of you in there? This is where we delve into the fascinating and sometimes shadowy realm of ancient belief systems surrounding mirrors and reflection, a mainstream historical understanding, largely drawn from extensive Egyptian records but with strong parallels and influences seen in Nubian culture. is that mirrors were far from being simple grooming aids. They were considered to possess magical properties. The reflective surface itself was thought to be almost otherworldly. A window, perhaps, or a gateway. Mirrors were often associated with goddesses of beauty, love, music, and joy. Like the Egyptian deity Hathor, who was frequently depicted holding a sistrum, a sacred rattle, and a mirror, often one with a handle shaped like her own face or a papyrus stalk. It's highly probable that similar divine associations existed within the Nubian pantheon, with local goddesses taking on these attributes of beauty, protection, and mystical sight. The gleam of a polished mirror was thought to ward off evil. Its brightness could deflect negative forces, protect the bearer from harm, or even reveal hidden truths. Imagine holding up your mirror not just to adjust your necklace, but as a shield against unseen malevolence. Its shiny surface a beacon of light in a world that could sometimes feel full of shadows and uncertainties. Then there's the profound connection many ancient cultures made between a reflection and the soul, or at least an aspect of it. The Egyptians had complex concepts of the soul, including the Ka, the life force or spiritual double, and the Ba, the personality or individual essence. Egyptologists and scholars of Nubian religion continue to debate the precise nature of the Ka or Ba soul aspects, often depicted in art and funerary texts, and whether a mirror reflection was considered a direct manifestation of one of these spiritual components, a temporary dwelling place for it, or simply a symbolic representation aiding in its continued existence after death. Regardless of the exact theological mechanics, the idea that your reflection was intimately linked to your essential self, your vital essence, was prevalent. Looking into a mirror might have been seen as looking at your own Ka, your spiritual twin. This adds a whole new layer of pressure to your morning routine. Doesn't it must look presentable for the Ka? He's apparently very judgmental before his morning cup of barley brew and a chat with the Bey. This belief also explains why mirrors were so often included in tombs, a practice we'll delve into more deeply later. If the mirror held or represented a part of your soul, or was necessary for the soul's recognition of itself and its journey in the afterlife, then it became an essential piece of funerary equipment, as vital as food offerings or protective amulets. One rather quirky or fringe tidbit that surfaces in folklore around mirrors in various cultures, and it's plausible similar notions existed in the ancient Nile Valley, is the idea that a mirror could do more than just reflect. It could capture something. Perhaps it was believed that a mirror could hold on to the last image it reflected, if not properly covered or cleared, leading to some rather awkward ghostly images if you weren't careful, or, more seriously, that staring too intently or too long into one's own reflection might be spiritually perilous. Perhaps allowing a malevolent spirit to enter through that reflective portal, or even slowly draining one's own vitality, among a sort of ancient concern about your spiritual battery life being depleted by excessive mirror gazing. Some traditions also held superstitions about breaking a mirror. While the 7 years of bad luck is a later concept, the idea that damaging an object so intimately connected to one's image or soul would bring misfortune or displease the gods isn't a far stretch for the ancient mind. It wasn't just the financial loss of a valuable crafted item, it was the potential spiritual fallout that would have caused concern. Mirrors might also have been used in forms of divination, a practice known as cat-optromancy. By gazing into the reflective surface, perhaps in a specific ritual setting, under particular lighting conditions, or after certain preparations, a priest, priestess, or seer might seek to discern omens, interpret dreams, or gain hidden knowledge. The mirror became a scrying tool, its depths offering glimpses beyond the veil of ordinary perception, the slightly distorted. Sometimes shadowy images produced by bronze mirrors, especially in flickering lamplight, could easily lend themselves to imaginative interpretation. So, when you, as an ancient Nubian, picked up your mirror, you weren't just picking up a tool for vanity, you were holding an object of power, an artifact imbued with layers of meaning. It reflected your face, yes, but it also reflected your beliefs about life, death, the soul, and the ever-present interplay of the seen and unseen worlds. It was a connection to the divine, a protector against evil, a keeper of identity, and a window into mysteries. Imagine trying to explain to an ancient Nubian artisan who poured their skill and perhaps their spiritual intent into crafting such a significant object. That one day, far into the future, people would carry tiny, mass-produced reflective rectangles in their pockets, not primarily to capture their soul or ward off demons, but mostly to check for rogue poppy seeds after a meal, or even more bizarrely, to take countless pictures of their own faces and their food to share with unseen strangers across the globe. The cultural disconnect, the sheer bafflement, would be immense and rather amusing to witness. The perceived frivolity might be shocking to a mind that saw reflection as a brush with the sacred. This deep symbolism, this belief in the mirror as more than just a reflection of the superficial, is what elevated these objects from mere possessions to cherished, powerful artifacts. They weren't just about looking good, they were about being in a world rich with spiritual significance. So, you've got this understanding now that your ancient Nubian mirror isn't just a pretty trinket or a simple tool for checking your hairstyle. It's an object resonating with spiritual significance, a potential ward against unseen evils, and a direct link to your very essence, your ka or ba, but with all that heavy metaphysical lifting. How did it actually fit into the nitty-gritty of an average, or perhaps not so average, day along the sun-drenched Nile? Let's imagine the sun is just beginning to paint the eastern sky with those familiar hues of apricot and rose. You stir from your slumber, perhaps on a woven reed mat or a slightly more luxurious low-slung bed if you're a person of some means. What's the first order of business waking up in ancient Nubia? Well, first things first. Maybe you murmur a quick prayer to a household deity. Then perhaps check if the dream interpreter left any urgent messages on a papyrus slip. Then, and only then, for some. Is it mirror time? Priorities, people. If you are a woman of a certain standing, say the wife of a wealthy merchant or a noble official, your mirror is likely a prized possession. It might be kept in a carved wooden box, perhaps lined with linen, alongside your collection of coal pots, galena grinders, ochre cakes, and little jars of fragrant oils and unguents. Your morning routine, much like today for many, would involve a period of self-adornment, and the mirror would be your indispensable assistant. You'd sit, perhaps on a low stool, with a servant girl attending you. Or maybe you prefer the quiet intimacy of performing these rituals yourself. The bronze disc, cool to the touch initially, would be brought forth. A quick buff with a soft gazelle hide or a piece of fine linen to ensure its surface is as bright as possible. Remember, these weren't self-cleaning, tarnish-resistant wonders. Then, leaning in close, you'd use its reflection to carefully apply the dark kohl around your eyes. Not just for beauty, but also believed to protect against the harsh sun glare and even ward off eye infections. A bit of ancient wisdom mixed with aesthetic flair. You check the symmetry, the thickness of the line, ensuring it enhances the almond shape so admired. Maybe a touch of green malachite powder on the eyelids for special occasions. The mirror faithfully reports back, your silent, gleaming confidant. Or picture a powerful Nubian warrior, a Medjay archer perhaps, renowned for his skill and fierceness, while his primary concerns might be the state of his bowstring or the sharpness of his arrows. Even he might have a moment with a reflection. It's a well-established historical fact that mirrors and cosmetics weren't exclusively female domains in many ancient societies, including Egypt and by strong cultural connection. Nubia, evidence from tombs, artistic depictions, and preserved cosmetic kits strongly indicates that men, particularly those of higher status, also engaged in personal grooming that would necessitate a mirror. Our warrior might use a simpler, more robust mirror, perhaps one with a sturdy, unadorned handle, to ensure his ceremonial face paint is correctly applied before a festival, or to check that his elaborately braided and oiled hair, a mark of his status and prowess, is in perfect order. It's not vanity, it's about presenting an image of strength, discipline, and readiness. Imagine a high-ranking official meticulously applying his own subtle kohl. Don't want to look like I wrestled a baboon this morning before addressing the royal court. He might think, it's a bad look for diplomacy, and the baboons around here are surprisingly strong. What about a priest or priestess preparing for sacred duties within the cool, shadowy confines of a temple dedicated to a moon or a local lion-headed deity like Apidamak here? The mirror might transcend its role in personal appearance and take on a more explicitly ritualistic function. The reflection could be used for purification ceremonies, for meditative gazing to achieve a trance state, or even, as we speculated, for divination, seeking guidance from the gods in its shimmering depths. The mirror in such a context becomes a sacred implement, handled with reverence, its surface reflecting not just a human face but the very mysteries of the cosmos. Social historians continue to explore the extent to which access to mirrors and the accompanying elaborate grooming practices truly permeated all levels of ancient Nubian society, or if the more finely crafted bronze mirrors, in particular, remained primarily the preserve of the elite, priestly classes, and royalty, whose tombs often yield these precious items. For the average farmer toiling in the fields along the Nile, or the humble potter shaping clay, their daily reflection might have been less gleaming bronze disc glamour and more fleeting glimpse in the murky waters of the irrigation channel, while simultaneously hoping a crocodile doesn't mistake your foot for a mid-morning snack. Still counts as self-awareness, I suppose, just with a higher risk factor. Yet, even for those without personal bronze mirrors, the idea of reflection, the importance of appearance within the community, would have been understood, perhaps simpler. Polished pieces of local stone, or even carefully guarded shards of obsidian traded from afar, served as rudimentary reflective surfaces for a wider populace. Or maybe communal grooming, with friends or family members assisting each other, relied more on touch, shared aesthetic understanding, and verbal feedback than on individual mirror use. One rather quirky tidbit to ponder is how artisans themselves might have used mirrors. Imagine a sculptor working on a life-size statue of a pharaoh or a god. They might use a polished bronze sheet not just to check their own appearance, but to view their work from the different angles, to check for symmetry and proportion in a way that direct observation might miss. A sort of ancient quality control process using reflected light. Or a dancer, practicing intricate movements for a religious festival, might have used a large, stationary polished surface, if such existed, to refine their posture and gestures much like a modern dance studio mirror. Children, too, would have encountered reflections. Perhaps they didn't own their own finely crafted mirrors, but they would have seen adults using them, observed their own faces in still water, and maybe even played with simpler, less valuable reflective objects. The fascination with one's own image, that little person looking back, is a universal part of growing up. So, throughout a typical day in ancient Nubia, from the noble's private chambers to the sacred space of the temple, and perhaps even in the craftsman's bustling workshop, the mirror, in its various forms and imbued with its many layers of meaning, played its part. It was there for the necessary grooming that prepared one to face the world, for the artistic expression that defined one's status and identity, for the sacred rituals that connected one to the divine, and for those quiet, personal moments of simply seeing oneself, a flicker of recognition in a world that was, in so many ways, vastly different from our own, yet in this human need to see and be seen, remarkably similar. The sun would set, casting long shadows, and perhaps the mirror would be carefully put away, its duty done for the day, ready to reflect anew with the dawn. All right, so your ancient Nubian mirror is cleaned, maybe with a whispered incantation for extra clarity or just a good old-fashioned buff with a piece of soft, well-worn leather. It's poised and ready. You've acknowledged its deeper, soulful significance. You've seen how it might fit into the rhythm of a day, but now we arrive at one of its most undeniably glamorous, and let's face it, most frequently imagined, roles its function as the indispensable partner in the elaborate dance of ancient cosmetics and adornment. Because looking good, or at least looking intentional, has been a human preoccupation since. Well, probably since the first hominid caught a surprisingly flattering reflection in a still pond and thought, not bad. Could use a little something around the eyes. Though, so you've got your mirror, polished to a T. Now for the main event, turning your face into a masterpiece that says regal, slightly intimidating, and definitely not bothered by the 5,000 flies buzzing around your immediate personal space. The star of the ancient Nile Valley cosmetic show, for both Nubians and Egyptians, was undoubtedly kohl. This dark, dramatic powder, usually a deep black or gray, was everything. It's a well-established mainstream fact that kohl, typically made by grinding minerals like galena lead sulfide or stibnite antimony sulfide into a superfine powder, was widely used around the eyes by both men and women. This wasn't just a fleeting fashion trend. We're talking millennia of dedication to the smoky eye look. Archaeologists find coal tubes, grinding pallets, and delicate applicator sticks in abundance in tombs from these regions, showing just how central it was. So, you take your small stone pallet, perhaps made of slate or alabaster, cool and smooth to the touch, on it. You'd place a tiny amount of this precious coal powder. Then, with a drop or two of water, or perhaps a specially prepared oil, you'd mix it into a paste. Your bronze mirror is propped up, angled just so, catching the diffuse light filtering into your dwelling. Using a slender applicator stick made of wood, ivory, bone, or even silver if you were particularly fancy, you would carefully, painstakingly, draw those iconic lines around your eyes. The goal was often an elongated almond shape, believed to be beautiful and also, quite practically, to help reduce the blinding glare of that relentless African sun reflecting off the sand and water. It was also thought to have protective qualities, warding off eye infections, the original medicated makeup. If you will, applying that perfect. Symmetrical winged liner with a tiny stick and a potentially wobbly bronze mirror probably required the steady hands of a brain surgeon and the patience of someone waiting for the Nile to flood. No wonder they often looked so serene and composed in their tomb paintings. They were just immensely relieved the makeup part was over for the day. But it wasn't just about the dramatic eyes. Your mirror would also assist in the application of other color cosmetics. Green eye paint, made from powdered malachite, a copper carbonate mineral, was also popular. Sometimes applied to the eyelids or beneath the brow. Red ochre, a natural earth pigment, would be ground and mixed with a little fat or oil to create a paste for tinting the lips and perhaps adding a subtle blush to the cheeks, giving a warm, lifelike glow to the skin. Each application, each subtle shading, would be checked and double-checked in that precious reflective surface. And then there were the oils and unguents, essential in the dry Nubian climate to keep skin supple and protected. These weren't your modern, light-as-air lotions. They were often based on animal fats, perhaps from cattle or geese, or plant oils like castor oil, moringa oil, or bolanos oil, infused with fragrant resins, flowers, and spices. Frankincense and myrrh, traded from distant lands, were highly prized for their rich, balsamic scents. Crushed lily petals, cardamom, cinnamon, or sweet calamus root might also find their way into these perfumed concoctions. Your mirror wouldn't directly help you slather these on, but it would certainly help you admire the healthy sheen they gave your skin, and to ensure you hadn't accidentally left a greasy streak down your nose. the precise recipes for many ancient Nubian unguents, and the exact botanical sources for some of their highly prized incense and perfumes. Like the famed multi-ingredient incense known as kaifi, which had Egyptian origins but versions likely circulated in Nubia, are still subjects of ongoing research and sometimes spirited scholarly discussion. Scientists meticulously analyze chemical residues found on ancient cosmetic vessels and attempt to decipher often cryptic references in surviving texts and tomb inscriptions for clues to these long-lost aromatic secrets. Now for a quirky, and perhaps slightly alarming by modern standards, tidbit about ancient ingredients. While the Nubians and Egyptians had access to many wonderful natural products, some of their cosmetic and medicinal formulations could be, well, let's just say, earthy. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen we might have joked about earlier if we were following an outline that included it? Wink, wink? Well, while its primary use was debated, some say medicinal poultices, others a rather optimistic contraceptive. It highlights that ancient people weren't afraid to experiment with readily available, if somewhat unorthodox, organic materials. For instance, the fat of a hippopotamus was sometimes prized for certain ointments, perhaps believed to promote hair growth, because who knows more about luxurious growth than a hippo? Right. Or maybe certain types of clay or ash were mixed into preparations for their supposed purifying or mattifying properties. Thankfully, your bronze mirror wouldn't judge your choice of ingredients, only the final effect. Hair was another major focus of adornment. For both men and women, intricate braids, curls, extensions made from human hair, and elaborate wigs were all part of the repertoire. These styles often involved the use of beeswax or resin to hold them in place, and perfumed oils to give them sheen and fragrance. Your mirror would be absolutely crucial for achieving these complex coiffures, especially for seeing the back and sides. Perhaps with the help of a second, smaller mirror held by an attendant, creating that ancient infinity mirror effect to check all angles. The Nubians, particularly during the Meroitic period, developed distinctive styles including elaborate arrangements of small, tight curls, sometimes dusted with red ochre. They also wore intricate jewelry in their hair, beads of gold, carnelian, and faience woven into their locks, ensuring these adornments were perfectly placed. That every curl was just so would have been a task demanding time, skill, and the unwavering assistance of that ever-faithful bronze reflection. So, as you gaze into your Nubian mirror, you're not just seeing a face, you're seeing a canvas that tells a story of cultural values, of beauty standards, of ritual practice, and of a deep connection to the natural world, from which so many of these cosmetic ingredients were sourced. It reflected a person who understood the power of presentation, the art of self-care, and the subtle magic woven into the daily rituals of becoming. It was an age where beauty was bold, scents were sacred, and your mirror was your most trusted beauty editor. Section 8. All right, so you've meticulously applied your kohl. Your perfumed oils are making you smell divine enough to make the gods themselves a little bit jealous. And your hair is an absolute triumph of ancient engineering. All thanks to that trusty, gleaming bronze mirror. You're looking fabulous, feeling perhaps a little bit protected by its inherent magic. And your ka is presumably giving you a spiritual thumbs up. But the journey of the mirror in ancient Nubia doesn't just end with personal presentation, however crucial that might be. No, these reflective discs, so potent with symbolism, were also believed to offer glimpses into realms beyond the mundane, to serve as conduits in sacred spaces, and to play a role in the intricate dance between mortals and their powerful deities. So, after you've used your mirror to make sure your eyeliner wings could cut glass, and perhaps check for any rogue fig seeds, it's time to consider how it might have helped you, or at least the specialists. Chat with the gods, or at least get their attention in a suitably shiny manner. Multitasking at its finest, really. Step with me now, out of the relative quiet of your personal dwelling, and into the more resonant, incense-laden air of a Nubian temple. Perhaps it's a grand stone structure dedicated to a moon, the king of gods, whose worship spread south from Egypt. Or maybe a temple honoring a uniquely Nubian deity, like the fierce lion-headed god Apedamak, a warrior deity, a god of sustenance and victory, particularly revered in the Meroitic period. Inside, the light is dimmer, filtering in through high clerestory windows or the main portal, creating an atmosphere of cool shadow and dramatic shafts of sunlight. The air is thick with the complex, sweet, and resinous aroma of Kai-Fi incense smoldering in offering stands. Priests and priestesses, clad in clean white linen, move with a practiced, reverent grace. And here, within these sacred precincts, mirrors take on an even deeper layer of significance. It's a well-documented mainstream historical fact that mirrors held immense religious importance in ancient Egypt. And given the profound and lengthy cultural and religious interplay between Egypt and Nubia, including periods where they worshipped shared gods and Nubian pharaohs ruled Egypt, it's almost certain that many of these practices and beliefs found a vibrant expression in Kushite temples as well. Mirrors were potent symbols, often directly associated with solar deities because of their ability to reflect light, the very essence of life and divine power. They were also intrinsically linked to goddesses of beauty, fertility, joy, and protection, most notably Hathor, who was often titled the Lady of the Mirror or the Golden One. Her priestesses frequently used mirrors in their sacred dances and rituals. Imagine a priestess in a Nubian temple, perhaps during a festival honoring a goddess of fertility or protection. She might hold a highly polished bronze mirror, its surface catching a beam of sunlight deliberately channeled through an aperture in the temple roof. As she moves, she could direct this dazzling, concentrated light towards sacred images, towards the worshippers seeking a blessing, or out towards the land itself. A symbolic act of purification, of channeling divine energy, of dispelling darkness and negativity. The mirror becomes an instrument for wielding and directing sacred light, a tangible piece of the sun brought down to earth. Mirrors were also common and highly valued votive offerings presented to the deities in their temples. You might see them depicted in temple reliefs, being offered by the pharaoh or by high-ranking officials to a seated god or goddess. These weren't just casual gifts, they were offerings of something precious, something imbued with life-giving symbolism, something that could please and honor the divine. The act of offering a mirror was perhaps a way of offering clarity, truth, or even a piece of one's own reflected essence to the deity, ensuring their favorable gaze. Scholars continue to explore the nuanced differences and shared aspects between Egyptian and Nubian pantheons, particularly how major Nubian deities like the aforementioned lion-headed god Apedamak, or local manifestations of widely worshipped deities such as Isis, the Great Mother Goddess, or Amun, might have incorporated the symbolism and specific ritual use of mirrors. Perhaps these uses reflected unique aspects of Kushite theology and their distinct worldview, diverging subtly from purely Egyptian practices even while sharing common roots, beyond reflecting light and being valuable offerings. Mirrors might have played a role in oracular practices within the temple. We touched on katoptromancy, or divination by mirror gazing. In a more general sense, within the highly controlled and spiritually charged atmosphere of a temple, this practice would have taken on even greater weight. A specially consecrated mirror, perhaps kept in a sacred, hidden adyton, the innermost sanctum, might have been consulted by high priests or priestesses seeking answers from the divine. They might gaze into its depths, possibly after periods of fasting, chanting, or ingesting sacred substances, looking for signs, symbols, or visions to guide the ruler or the nation. The slight distortions and shimmering uncertainties of a bronze mirror's reflection could, in such a heightened state, easily transform into meaningful portents for a trained interpreter. One quirky or fringe tidbit to consider is the possibility of highly specific rituals surrounding temple mirrors. Perhaps they had to be polished only with ritually pure substances, like blessed water from a sacred pool mixed with a specific type of natron. Or maybe only priests or priestesses who had undergone extensive purification rites were permitted to handle or even gaze into certain sacred mirrors. Imagine a priest trying to get the sacred temple mirror perfectly angled to catch the first rays of the solstice sunrise to illuminate a particular statue or altar. A little to the left. No, my other left. Amun-Ra preserve us. Could someone just tell the sun to hold still for one celestial minute? The logistics of sacred optics could be quite demanding. Another fascinating idea, though more speculative, is that a mirror could have been used to feed a deity with reflected offerings? If the statue of a god was believed to house the deity's ka, then perhaps a mirror placed strategically could reflect the essence of the food and drink laid out on the offering table towards the statue, allowing the ka to partake of its spiritual substance, or in a more protective vein. A sacred mirror might have been ritually used in a sending back ceremony, a divine return to sender service, to powerfully deflect any curses, ill will, or malevolent magic directed towards the temple, the pharaoh, or the land, bouncing it right back to its origin. You wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that particular reflective justice. So, these gleaming discs were far more than just household items. In the hands of the temple personnel, they became tools of power, instruments of communication with the divine, symbols of life, light, and truth. They reflected the sun. They received offerings. They perhaps offered glimpses into the future. And they stood as silent, shining sentinels of sacred space. If a deity did happen to symbolically look out from their cult statue through a strategically placed mirror and saw the state of the offering table after a particularly rowdy public festival, perhaps with spilled beer and half-eaten pomegranates strewn about, they might just decide to communicate their displeasure via a strongly worded locust plague or a sudden, inconvenient sandstorm. Cleanliness is next to godliness. People and the gods have very high standards for their reflective selfies. The mirrors in the temple, therefore, reflected not just the faces of priests or the light of the sun, but the very heart of Nubian religious belief, a world alive with divine presence, where the veil between the mortal and the sacred was thin, and where a polished piece of bronze could become a shining gateway. Section 9. So, your ancient Nubian mirror has taken you from the practicalities of daily grooming to the profound depths of spiritual symbolism, and even into the hushed, incense-filled and sanctuaries of the gods themselves. It's clear these aren't just handy gadgets for checking if your headdress is on straight, but beyond the personal and the priestly. These gleaming discs also held another kind of power, a power that reflected not just your face, or your soul, or even divine light, but also your place in the intricate, often invisible, web of society. We're talking about mirrors as statements, mirrors of majesty. Imagine you're no longer just an everyday Nubian, but someone of considerable standing. Perhaps you are a wealthy merchant whose trade caravans bring exotic goods from Punt or across the vast Sahara. Maybe you're a high-ranking military commander, a governor of a province, or even a member of the royal family itself, living in the sprawling palace complexes of Kerma, Napata, or the later, grand city of Meroe with its distinctive pyramids. So, you're a Nubian bigwig. You've got the corner office in the mud brick but very well-appointed palace, the chariot with the best suspension system available circa 1500 BCE. What really screams, "I've arrived," to your peers and underlings? A mirror that doesn't make you look like a slightly blurry, vaguely orange potato. The quality, material, craftsmanship, and even the size of your mirror could say a lot about your status. It's a well-established mainstream historical fact that in many ancient societies, including Egypt and its southern Kushite neighbors, luxury goods were powerful indicators of wealth, high social status, and privileged access to skilled artisans and far-flung trade networks. And finely crafted mirrors, especially those made from more valuable materials or adorned with exquisite artistry, were definitely on that luxury goods list. While a common person, if they had a manufactured mirror at all, might possess a small, relatively plain disc of bronze, perhaps with a simple wooden handle. The elite would have aspired to something far grander. Their mirrors might be larger, offering a more generous field of reflection. The bronze itself might be of a superior alloy, perhaps containing a higher percentage of tin, or even a dash of arsenic handled carefully. One hopes, resulting in a brighter, more silvery, and less easily tarnished sheen. Having a mirror that tarnished slowly was the ancient equivalent of having a smartphone battery that actually lasts all day. A true mark of luxury and probably some very clever metallurgy, or at least a dedicated servant whose main job was royal mirror polisher. Then there's the possibility of mirrors made from even more precious metals. Silver. While much rarer and more difficult to work than bronze in antiquity, offers a significantly whiter, more brilliant reflection. A silver mirror, perhaps with a delicately incised backing and an elegant handle, would have been an object of immense value, a clear signal of extraordinary wealth and influence. Gold. While abundant in Nubia, the land was often called Taseti, meaning land of the bow, but also renowned for its gold mines, isn't actually ideal for a reflective surface due to its softness and deep yellow color. However, gold was certainly used lavishly to embellish mirror handles, to plate the non-reflective backs of bronze or silver discs, or to create intricate decorative elements, adding to the object's opulence and prestige. The handles themselves, as we touched upon, were a key area for showcasing status. While wood and bone were common, the elite might possess mirrors with handles crafted from imported ivory, meticulously carved into elaborate shapes, perhaps depicting protective deities, scenes of triumph, or graceful human figures. Lapis lazuli, that deep blue stone prized throughout the ancient world and traded all the way from the mines of Afghanistan, might be inlaid into the handle, along with carnelian, turquoise, or gleaming rock crystal. Each precious material added another layer of cost, rarity, and therefore status to the mirror. Archaeologists and historians often debate the precise social stratification within different periods of Nubian history, such as the powerful Kerma kingdom, the Egyptianized Napatan era, or the distinctively African Meroitic period. They also discuss the extent to which the ownership of these more elaborate, imported, or finely crafted mirrors was explicitly restricted by sumptuary laws rules dictating what different classes could own or wear, tightly controlled by royal workshops producing goods for the court, or simply limited by the sheer economic access to rare materials and the highly skilled artisans capable of producing such masterpieces. It's likely a combination of all these factors. One quirky or fringe tidbit to consider is the idea that certain mirror designs or specific motifs might have been reserved exclusively for royalty or the very highest echelons of nobility, almost like an ancient brand logo or heraldic crest. Imagine a Kandake, one of the powerful ruling queens of Meroe, possessing a magnificent mirror with her royal cartouche intricately worked into the gold detailing on its back, or its handle shaped like the lion god Apidamak, her personal divine patron. Such an object would be an unmistakable symbol of her unique authority and sacred power. Or perhaps mirrors formed an important part of a queen's or noblewoman's official regalia, displayed or used during important state ceremonies, signifying her role and her connection to divine beauty or truth. They could also have been significant components of a dowry, tangible representations of a family's wealth and status being transferred or allied through marriage. It's also plausible that particularly fine mirrors were exchanged as prestigious diplomatic gifts between rulers. Symbols of alliance, respect, or sometimes A very shiny form of political maneuvering. Oh, a gift from the pharaoh. How lovely. Is his new silver mirror as reflective as mine? I wonder, imagine the subtle, or perhaps not so subtle, social dynamics at play. Picture an elite gathering, a banquet in a nobleman's villa. The ladies and perhaps some of the gentlemen, too, might discreetly produce their mirrors to make a minor adjustment. But also, quite intentionally, to display the quality and artistry of their prized possession. Oh, that's your mirror, is it? Dear, how charmingly rustic. Is it actual bronze? Or just very well polished coppermine? As you can see, is from the royal workshops. A little gift from the Queen Mother. The reflection is simply divine. Don't you think the silent language of luxury goods, speaking volumes about power, connections, and exquisite taste, even thousands of years ago? So, when you gaze into that imagined Nubian mirror of majesty, you're seeing more than just an individual. You're seeing a reflection of a complex social hierarchy, a sophisticated material culture, and the universal human tendency to use possessions to signify identity. Status and power, the more intricate the craftsmanship, the rarer the materials, the brighter the gleam, the more it spoke of the owner's ability to command resources, to patronize the finest artisans, and to occupy a privileged position within the land of Kush. It reflected not just a face, but a place in the world. Section 10. All right, so you're picturing these magnificent Nubian mirrors, not just as personal grooming tools or sacred objects, but as gleaming symbols of status and power within Kushite society. The finer the craftsmanship, the rarer the materials like imported ivory or shimmering silver, the more it broadcasted the owner's wealth and influence. But these mirrors didn't just reflect the internal hierarchy of Nubia, they also held up a fascinating image of Nubia's place in the wider ancient world, especially its long, complicated, and utterly inseparable relationship with its northern neighbor, Egypt. So your fancy Nubian mirror isn't just reflecting your fabulous self. It's reflecting ancient international relations and some pretty complex supply chains, like a tiny, shiny United Nations headquarters for your dressing table, but with significantly better eyeliner and probably fewer tedious debates. The Nile River, that lifeblood we keep returning to, wasn't just for irrigating crops and providing a handy spot for hippo aerobics. It was a superhighway for trade and cultural exchange. For millennia, there was an almost continuous flow of goods, people, and ideas moving up and down its length between Egypt and the various Nubian kingdoms. This relationship was a real mixed bag. Sometimes they were close trading partners, sometimes fierce rivals, sometimes Egypt dominated Nubia, and sometimes, as with the glorious 25th dynasty, Nubian pharaohs ruled all of Egypt with impressive style and a dedication to reviving ancient traditions. This constant interaction, whether friendly or a bit more on the borrowing things permanently with pointy sticks side of things, inevitably led to a tremendous cross-pollination of artistic styles, technologies, and beliefs, and mirrors, being both utilitarian and highly symbolic. Were prime candidates for this cultural mashup. It's a mainstream historical fact that the trade between these two lands was extensive and vital for both. Nubia was rich in gold. The Egyptians practically drooled over Nubian gold. Ebony, ivory, incense like frankincense and myrrh, exotic animal skins, think leopard, ostrich feathers, and even skilled archers who were highly sought after as mercenaries. In return, Egypt would send manufactured goods southward, fine linen textiles. Wine, because who doesn't appreciate a good vintage? Even in 1500 BCE pottery, elaborate faience beads and amulets, glass, which was still a luxury novelty, and yes, sometimes even finished luxury items like mirrors or the raw materials and artistic know-how to inspire local versions. So, when you look at a Nubian mirror, you're often seeing this dynamic interplay. Is that handle shaped like a papyrus umbel a purely Egyptian import? a direct copy made by a Nubian artisan, or a Nubian adaptation of an Egyptian theme, perhaps with slightly different proportions or an added local motif. The exact extent and direction of artistic influence in mirror production between Nubia and Egypt during certain periods, particularly the Napatan era when the Kushite 25th dynasty ruled over Egypt itself, remains a fertile ground for scholarly discussion and reinterpretation. Some argue for significant Nubian innovation and adaptation, influencing even Egyptian styles during this time. A sort of co-opt the look but make it cooler approach. While others emphasize the continued prestige and dominant flow of established Egyptian artistic forms southward into Nubia, it was likely a two-way street, with ideas flowing in both directions. Depending on the prevailing political winds and trade connections, imagine a Nubian artisan, highly skilled in bronze work. Seeing an Egyptian mirror brought downriver by a trader, they might admire its form, the way its handle is carved to represent the goddess Hathor, a deity they also revered, perhaps under a slightly different local name or aspect. Our artisan might think. That Hathor handle is undeniably elegant, but what if we gave her slightly more impressive, distinctly Kushite-style earrings, and maybe a tiny pet lion peeking out from behind her crown? Just a thought. Cultural exchange and a bit of creative one-upmanship. Folks, it's as old as time. You might find a mirror in a Nubian tomb that has a bronze disc, clearly of local manufacture, based on the specific alloy or casting technique. But its handle is made of ivory that could only have come from elephants much further south in Africa, indicating long-distance internal African trade routes that then fed into the Nile corridor. Or, as a really quirky tidbit, imagine a mirror unearthed in Nubia whose handle incorporates a few precious beads of amber. Amber doesn't come from Africa. It was traded arduously overland from the Baltic region in northern Europe, thousands of miles away. Such a find, if it existed, would speak volumes about the incredible reach of ancient trade networks, connecting distant corners of the world through a chain of merchants and exchanges, all for a bit of golden-hued resin to adorn a precious object. Conversely, Nubian goods, and perhaps even distinctively Nubian-style mirrors, might have traveled north into Egypt and beyond, prized for their exotic appeal or the quality of their craftsmanship. Particularly in gold work, at which the Nubians excelled, a mirror could become a diplomatic gift, a trade item, or even loot from a military campaign. Its journey reflecting the shifting fortunes of empires, keeping up with the pharaohs or the Kandakes. The powerful ruling queens of Meroe was an expensive business, after all. They've got mirrors with lapis lazuli inlay from Afghanistan in the northern courts, right? Dispatch a caravan immediately. We need more of those delightful blue rocks and see if they have any of that newfangled glass stuff yet. Even if it's just for a few tiny beads on the handle, we must keep up appearances. Darling, the style of decoration on the non-reflective back of the mirror could also tell a story of these cross-border influences. You might see Egyptian motifs like the Ankh symbol of life, the scarab beetle symbol of rebirth, or the Ujat eye symbol of protection and health, appearing on mirrors found in Nubia. But often, these symbols would be rendered with a uniquely Nubian sensibility, perhaps a bit bolder in outline, or combined with local geometric patterns or animal figures that held particular significance in Kushite culture. Sometimes, it's not even about direct copying, but about shared concepts. The sun disk, a powerful symbol in both cultures, might appear as a decorative element, or the mirror itself, being round and reflective, would inherently echo solar symbolism without needing explicit depiction. The very idea of the mirror being linked to goddesses of beauty and fertility, like Hathor or Isis, who was also fervently worshipped in Nubia, sometimes merged with Nubian goddesses, was a shared theological landscape that would have informed the design and perceived power of these objects in both lands. So, as you drift off, picture those ancient trade routes, not just as lines on a map, but as vibrant arteries of connection, with boats sailing the Nile laden with precious metals. exotic woods, fragrant resins, and, of course, beautifully crafted mirrors passing from one culture to another, each object carrying a silent story of its origin, its journey, and the fascinating interplay of civilizations that once thrived along those shimmering, life-giving waters. These mirrors reflected far more than faces. They reflected a whole interconnected ancient world. So, your ancient Nubian mirror has reflected your daily life, your social standing, your connection to the divine, and even the intricate web of trade and cultural exchange that pulsed along the Nile. It's been a busy, multifaceted object. But what happened when the day was truly done? When life itself drew to a close, did the mirror's story end there? Tarnishing forgotten in a dusty corner? Oh, absolutely not. In many ways, its most profound and perhaps most crucial role was just beginning. We now follow the gleam of these reflective discs into the cool, silent, and sacred darkness of the tomb. So you've shuffled off this mortal coil, Nubian style, after the elaborate rituals of mourning and mummification, designed to preserve your earthly form for its eternal journey. What do you pack for the big trip to the afterlife? Your best linen garments, naturally, some enduring snacks for the journey, dates, dried figs, maybe a nice loaf of barley bread, a few favorite amulets for protection, and absolutely, under no circumstances, if you were a person of any note, did you forget your mirror? You'd want to look presentable for Osiris, the lord of the underworld, or whichever deities were overseeing your particular judgment day. Obviously, the inclusion of mirrors as grave goods is an incredibly common and highly significant archaeological finding in tombs from ancient Egypt and throughout the various periods of the Nubian kingdoms. From the early days of Kerma with its grand tumuli burials, to the Egyptianized pharaohs of Napata and the later pyramid-building rulers of Meroe, these mirrors are often found carefully placed alongside the deceased, frequently accompanied by their cosmetic palettes. Kohl tubes, tweezers, razors if you were a gent who preferred a clean shave for eternity, and other personal grooming items. This isn't just random clutter. It's a clear indication that these objects were considered absolutely essential for the deceased's existence, well-being, or perilous journey in the afterlife. But why? What was the thinking behind ensuring your reflection could accompany you into the great beyond? Well, remember our earlier discussion about the mirror's connection to the soul. To the Ka or Ba, one strong possibility is that the mirror was vital for self-recognition by these spiritual aspects after death. Imagine your Ka, your spiritual double, trying to navigate the complexities of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, concepts of which influenced Nubian beliefs, and needing to reunite with your mummified body to achieve eternal life. Is that me over there? Looking a bit desiccated. It might ponder. Hard to tell without my trusty bronze reflector. Last thing I need is to accidentally attempt to reanimate a particularly grumpy baboon mummy that got mislabeled. Ha! The mirror, holding your familiar image, could act as a crucial point of identification, a homing beacon for your dispersed spiritual elements. Then there's the idea of continuity. The ancient Nubians, like their Egyptian neighbors, generally envisioned the afterlife as a continuation, albeit an idealized one, of earthly existence. You'd still want to look your best in the field of reeds or whatever version of paradise you were aiming for. Personal appearance, status, and well-being were concerns that didn't just vanish with your last breath. So, your mirror, along with your makeup and jewelry, was packed to ensure you could maintain your accustomed lifestyle and social standing in the next world. It was the ancient equivalent of making sure your eternal profile picture was perfectly up-to-date and looking suitably beatific. Not at all like you spent the last 70 days being meticulously, if somewhat invasively, embalmed. The precise function and symbolic weight of mirrors within specific Nubian funerary assemblages is still a subject of ongoing interpretation and lively academic discussion. Scholars debate whether their primary role was for the deceased's continued personal grooming and the maintenance of social status in the afterlife. As potent tools for magical protection against malevolent entities during the perilous journey through the underworld, or as crucial symbolic aids for the soul's difficult passage, self-recognition, and ultimate transformation into a blessed Akh, an effective and transfigured spirit. It was likely a potent combination of all these aspects. The magical, protective qualities of mirrors wouldn't be diminished by death. In fact, they might be considered even more vital. The journey to the afterlife was often depicted as fraught with dangers, terrifying demons, challenging judgments, and tricky gateways guarded by fearsome entities. A gleaming mirror, with its ability to reflect light and ward off evil, could have been seen as a powerful amulet, a shield to protect the deceased soul on its hazardous voyage. Its reflective surface might symbolically repel harmful spirits, or even capture and neutralize negative forces encountered along the way. One quirky tidbit often observed by archaeologists is the condition of mirrors found in tombs. Some show clear signs of heavy, everyday use, scratches, dents, areas where the polish has been worn thin from countless buffings. These were clearly cherished personal possessions, accompanying their owner like a beloved old friend into eternity. In contrast, other mirrors appear almost pristine, brand new, perhaps crafted specifically for the burial. This might suggest a desire to provide the deceased with a perfect, untarnished reflection for their new existence. Or perhaps these specially made funerary mirrors were imbued with even more potent ritual purity and magical efficacy. The placement of the mirror within the tomb could also be significant. Sometimes it's found near the head of the deceased, easily accessible for their spirit. Other times it might be placed in their hands, or nestled within a special cosmetic box alongside other grooming implements. Occasionally, mirrors have been found with traces of their original linen wrapping still clinging to them, or remnants of a carved wooden case, indicating the care with which these valuable items were interred. You can imagine the solemn moments of the burial ritual, the priest or family member carefully positioning the mirror, perhaps with a final whispered blessing for its continued service to the departed in the land of the dead. Consider the materials, too. A mirror of mere bronze was valuable, but one of silver, or a bronze one with a lavishly decorated gold-plated handle featuring precious inlays, buried with its owner. That wasn't just about looking good in the afterlife. That was about ensuring your status, your wealth, your sheer importance was unequivocally recognized by gods and spirits alike. It was a statement that your majesty didn't just end at the tomb's entrance. "Yes, I've arrived in the underworld," the mirror proclaimed. "And I expect the VIP section. Thank you very much." So, as you drift and dream, picture those silent tombs beneath the Nubian sands, not as places of mere death and decay, but as carefully prepared vessels for an ongoing journey. And within them, those polished discs of bronze or silver, catching no earthly light now, but still gleaming with an otherworldly purpose, reflecting the hope of eternal life, the belief in the enduring self, and the meticulous care taken to ensure that even in the great unknown, one could still, in some profound way, see and be seen. So, we've journeyed deep into the heart of ancient Nubia, following the gleam of bronze mirrors from the artisan's fiery forge to the noble's private chamber, from the sacred temple precinct to the silent, eternal embrace of the tomb. It's clear these objects were profoundly important, reflecting not just faces, but beliefs, status, and a whole worldview. But as you drift and ponder, you might wonder, were the Nubians and their Egyptian neighbors the only ancient folks obsessed with their own reflections? The only ones to graduate from squinting into wobbly puddles? Oh, not by a long shot, turns out. The desire to see oneself, to capture that fleeting image, was a pretty global human preoccupation, even if your wall was the side of a cave and your mirror was, well, still mostly a puddle for a good while. The mirror, mirror on the wall query, in some rudimentary form, echoed across continents and cultures long before fairy tales were ever written. So, Let's zoom out a little from the Nile Valley and take a brief, sleepy glance at some other global pondering puddles and the shiny things that eventually replace them, just to see how our Nubian mirrors fit into the grand, ancient scheme of self-contemplation. It's a mainstream historical fact that while polished bronze became a very common and successful material for mirrors across a vast swathe of the ancient world, from the sun-drenched shores of the Mediterranean basin where the Greeks, Etruscans, and later the Romans all crafted their own versions, through the ancient civilizations of the Near East, and stretching all the way to distant China during its magnificent Bronze Age dynasties like the Shang and Zhou, distinct regional styles definitely emerged. Just like with pottery or fashion, you could often tell where a mirror was from by its particular flair. These differences might be in the preferred shape of the mirror disc itself, while the round disc was popular almost everywhere, including Nubia and Egypt. You might find oval shapes, or even rectangular ones in some cultures, though those were rarer for metal mirrors. Then there were the handles. Our Nile Valley friends, as we've seen, often favored beautifully crafted handles of ivory, wood, or metal, sometimes shaped like papyrus plants or human figures. Travel over to ancient Greece, and you'd find mirrors with equally ornate handles, perhaps depicting gods, goddesses, or scenes from mythology, or they might have caryatid mirrors, where the handle was a standing female figure supporting the disc. Some Greek and Etruscan mirrors were box mirrors, with two hinged discs, one polished for reflection and the other often elaborately engraved on its inner surface, forming a protective case when closed. Smart. Kept the important side from getting scratched by your other ancient pocket stuff. The Romans, ever the pragmatists, also made bronze mirrors. But as their empire expanded and their access to resources grew, they became particularly fond of silver mirrors, or at least bronze mirrors with a highly reflective silver coating, because silver gives a much brighter, whiter reflection than bronze. Their mirrors were often sturdy, functional, and perhaps less overtly symbolic than some of the Nile Valley examples, though they still appreciated a bit of decorative flourish. Now, let's take a long, sleepy caravan journey eastward, all the way to ancient China. During the Shang and Zhou dynasties, thousands of years ago, Chinese artisans were producing some of the most exquisite bronze mirrors the world has ever seen. These weren't typically designed with handles like their Nile Valley counterparts. Instead, they often had a central knob or a loop on the back, through which a cord could be passed for holding or hanging. The truly astonishing part was the decoration on the non-reflective back. Chinese bronze mirrors are famous for their intricate cast designs, complex geometric patterns, cosmological symbols, mythical creatures like dragons and phoenixes, and inscriptions wishing good fortune or longevity. The level of detail is just breathtaking. And here's a really quirky tidbit that sets some Chinese mirrors apart: the so-called magic mirrors or light-transmitting mirrors. Particularly famous from the Han Dynasty, these masterpieces of ancient metallurgy had these intricate cast designs on their backs. But due to incredibly subtle, almost imperceptible variations in the curvature of the polished front surface, variations created by the stresses during the casting, cooling, and polishing process, something amazing happened. When bright sunlight was reflected off the mirror's face onto a nearby wall, the hidden pattern from the back would miraculously appear in the reflection, as if the light were somehow passing right through the solid bronze. It must have seemed like pure magic to the uninitiated. A true marvel. This is a fascinating contrast to the primary purpose of most Nile Valley mirrors, which, while symbolic, were more directly about straightforward reflection for personal or ritual use. Not projecting hidden images, imagine an ancient international mirror convention, the Chinese delegation nonchalantly showing off their light-projecting wonders, the Romans with their sturdy, no-nonsense silver ones, and the Nubians proudly presenting theirs. Ours come with optional divine protection from Apidamoch and look absolutely fabulous with coal. Beat that for all-around utility. the exact technological and artistic exchanges regarding mirror-making techniques and decorative styles between these major Bronze Age civilizations. Say, the Nile Valley. The Aegean world, Minoan and Mycenaean cultures also had lovely bronze mirrors. The Indus Valley Civilization, which had its own early forms of polished copper or bronze reflectors, and ancient China, are incredibly complex and still subjects of ongoing archaeological investigation and lively scholarly debate. Sometimes the evidence points to direct trade and influence, like certain motifs traveling along ancient trade routes. Other times, it seems more like remarkable instances of parallel development where different cultures independently arrived at similar solutions to the universal problem of wanting a decent reflection. Driven by similar material availability, copper and tin for bronze being fairly widespread eventually, and that fundamental human desire to see oneself, even further afield. In the Americas, ancient Mesoamerican civilizations like the Olmec, Maya, and Aztec developed mirrors from a completely different material, obsidian, this volcanic glass. When carefully fractured and polished to an almost perfect smoothness, creates a deep, dark, incredibly sharp reflection, albeit one that can feel a bit more mysterious or even unsettling than a warm bronze gleam. These obsidian mirrors were highly prized, often associated with rulers, priests, and divination, reflecting a different kind of cultural and spiritual emphasis. It's also interesting to note that some cultures were a bit late to the mirror party, or simply didn't prioritize individually crafted mirrors in the same way. You can almost picture them still stoically using puddles or a well-polished shield boss while their more reflective neighbors were busy mass-producing ancient-style mass-producing bronze beauties for export. Don't mind us, they might say. Just communing with nature here, and trying to see if this rather fetching warthog tusk helmet is on entirely straight before the big village dance. So, while our ancient Nubian friends were gazing into their beautifully crafted bronze discs, with their distinctive handles and rich symbolism tied to the Nile and their unique pantheon, they were part of a much larger, global human story. A story of looking, seeing, and trying to understand who we are, reflected back at us from surfaces coaxed into brilliance by human hands, whether in Africa, Europe, Asia, or the Americas. Each culture brought its own artistry, its own beliefs, and its own unique shimmer to the age-old quest for a clearer gaze. Section 13. So, we've taken a sleepy little detour around the ancient globe, peeking at Chinese magic mirrors, Roman silver reflectors, and Mesoamerican obsidian scrying tools, all to get a sense of how our ancient Nubian friends and their shiny bronze discs fit into the grand human tapestry of self-admiration and symbolic gazing. It's a big, reflective world out there. But now, let's gently drift back to the sun-baked banks of the Nile, to the heart of Kush, and ask a rather practical question: how on earth do we actually know all this stuff about their mirrors? Did some obliging Nubian scribe leave behind a detailed, illustrated catalog titled Mirrors of the Middle Nile for Dummies, complete with user reviews and polishing tips? Well, not usually, though that would have been incredibly convenient for future historians. No, for the most part. Our understanding of these ancient reflective tools, their designs, their materials, and their significance, comes from the painstaking, often backbreaking, work of some very dedicated people archaeologists. It involves a lot of incredibly patient individuals with very tiny brushes, an almost supernatural ability to decipher clues from fragments, and an astonishing tolerance for getting sand in their sandwiches, their ears, and pretty much everywhere else. Much of our current knowledge about ancient Nubian material culture, which naturally includes their mirrors, comes from systematic archaeological excavations that have been conducted over the last century or so. You have to imagine these expeditions setting out, often into harsh, remote desert landscapes, driven by a burning curiosity to uncover the secrets of these long-lost civilizations. Pioneering figures like the American archaeologist George Reisner, in the early 20th century, led some of the first major scientific explorations of Nubian sites, excavating royal cemeteries at places like Kerma and Meroe, and bringing to light a wealth of artifacts, including, yes, a good number of mirrors. More recently, particularly from the mid-20th century onwards, vast international salvage archaeology campaigns were launched. This was often a race against time, a desperate effort to explore and document as much as possible before countless ancient sites were submerged forever by the rising waters of the Nile due to the construction of the Aswan High Dam in Egypt. And later, the Meroe Dam in Sudan. It's a bittersweet reality. Modern development sometimes necessitates the flooding of ancient lands, but it also prompts these incredible, intensive efforts to rescue their history. Discovering an ancient mirror during one of these salvage digs is like finding a remarkably well-preserved selfie from 3 or 4,000 years ago. Except the phone is considerably heavier, probably made of bronze, and the filter is several millennia of accumulated dirt, corrosion, and the occasional grumpy scorpion nest. Still incredibly exciting, though. These expeditions have unearthed mirrors from all the key periods of Nubian history. The powerful early kingdom of Kerma, with its unique burial mounds called tumuli, the Napatan period, when Nubian kings famously conquered and ruled Egypt as the 25th dynasty, adopting and adapting many Egyptian customs, and the later, distinctly African Meroitic kingdom, with its own script, its warrior queens known as Kandakes, and its iconic steep-sided pyramids. Mirrors are most commonly found within funerary contexts, that is, in tombs, carefully placed alongside the deceased as grave goods. As we've discussed, this is partly because tombs, especially those of the elite, were often designed to protect their contents from the elements and, less successfully, from ancient tomb robbers. A settlement site, where people lived their daily lives, might see objects get broken, discarded, or recycled much more readily. But a tomb was meant for eternity. Imagine being part of one of these digs. You're carefully brushing away layers of sand and soil, perhaps within the cramped confines of a burial chamber that hasn't seen the light of day for thousands of years. The air is still and dry, and then your brush reveals a telltale greenish patina, the sign of corroded bronze. With painstaking care, the object is gradually exposed. It's a disc, maybe with a fragment of a wooden or ivory handle still attached, or perhaps just the stain in the soil where the organic material has long since decayed. It's a mirror, a direct link to an individual who lived, breathed, and saw their own face in its now dulled surface. The challenges of preservation are immense. Bronze, being an alloy of copper, is highly susceptible to corrosion over long periods underground, especially if there's any moisture. The once bright, reflective surface is often found covered in a thick, rough, green or bluish layer of copper carbonates or chlorides. Organic materials like wood, ivory, bone, linen wrappings, or leather cases rarely survive intact, unless the burial conditions are exceptionally dry. Like in some parts of the deep desert, sometimes all that's left of an elaborate handle is a faint outline or a few discolored fragments. This is where the skills of conservators come in. Back in the lab, these ancient mirrors undergo careful cleaning and stabilization to prevent further decay and, if possible, to reveal some of their original detail. It's a delicate business. You can't just whip out your modern metal polish and give it a good shine. Oops, I think I just polished away a thin layer of irreplaceable incised decoration from the Meroitic period, possibly depicting the royal insignia of Queen Amenarenas. Probably not something you want on your archaeological resume or your conscience. One particularly quirky or interesting tidbit from the world of archaeology might be the story of a specific mirror's discovery. Imagine an archaeologist meticulously excavating what appears to be a thoroughly plundered royal tomb at Meroe. Disappointment heavy in the air. And then, tucked away in a small, overlooked niche, perhaps hidden beneath a pile of broken pottery. They find a small, exquisitely crafted cosmetic box made of carved ebony. Inside, nestled amongst tiny pots of what might once have been coal and perfumed unguents, lies a perfectly preserved, albeit tarnished, bronze mirror, its ivory handle still showing faint traces of the original painted geometric patterns. A treasure overlooked by hurried ancient looters, now offering a precious, intimate glimpse into its owner's daily life. Or perhaps a mirror is found fused by corrosion to a fragment of ancient linen, the weave of the fabric perfectly imprinted onto the metal surface. Giving a double insight, the mirror itself and the textile that once wrapped it, the interpretation of specific workshop sites, and whether they were primarily dedicated mirror production centers supplying a local or regional demand, or if they were more general bronze working facilities where mirrors were just one of many items produced, is often complicated by the fragmentary nature of archaeological remains. The extensive reuse of valuable metal scrap in antiquity means that a failed mirror casting might have been melted down and turned into a tool or a weapon, leaving little direct evidence of the mirror-making process itself. This leads to ongoing scholarly discussions and detailed material analyses of slag heaps, crucible fragments, and casting molds to try and piece together the full story of their manufacture. So every Nubian mirror you see in a museum collection, every illustration in a history book, is the result of this incredible chain of discovery, preservation, and interpretation. It's a testament not just to the ancient Nubians who made and used them, but also to the generations of archaeologists and scientists who have carefully unearthed these shiny fragments of the past, allowing their stories and the faces they once reflected to gleam, however faintly, once more. Section 14. So,